there's often just some anxiety, trepidation for the overwhelming nature of our culture and like, how can I even raise a boy in the world today? We were new to Hawaii. My husband was in medical residency. And so it was a really lonely season. And I struggled a lot as a mom. I struggled with my temper. I struggled just with that sense of wanting to control things that I couldn't control. So that's when I really dug in. I look back and just see those years as probably the most formative of my life. There's a lot of details we have to focus on as parents, but certainly the heart, it all comes from the heart. And if you can focus on that, everything else is probably going to fall into place. One day I just kind of sat down and wrote this blog post. It was when my second son became a teenager. So now I had two teens, and just kind of off the top of my head, I wrote what a teenage boy needs most from his mom. And it was like 11 things. And it really wasn't rocket science. It wasn't anything brand new, but it was what I considered common sense. Now, I have since then realized that common sense is not very common anymore. But as soon as that went out, like my computer basically blew up over the next few weeks. Like almost 2 million people read it, I think, in the first 2 weeks. I was just being flooded by emails. And it was like, I think the message in there that people were so hungry for was that message of hope. 3 John 4 is my very favorite parenting verse. I have no greater joy than to hear that my children walk in truth. And that's something I can't even put into words. I just tell young moms, it's so worth all the work now. Like, put that work in now, because nothing will feel better than to have an adult who is walking with Jesus. And that's like the greatest reward for all your work.
Excited to have a mom's voice on the show today, guys. That's what's straight ahead. So let's go. Well, hey guys, welcome into the Next Man Up podcast. So good to have you along with us for another episode, and grateful that you're part of this community that is about being and raising healthy and godly men. You know this, I'm Mark, and I'm excited to be your host for another conversation. This one involving a mom. I'm so excited about this one. Guys, Monica Swanson is our guest today. She's a popular blogger. She's a host of the Boy Mom podcast, which is now the Monica Swanson podcast. She's the author of Boy Mom and her newest release coming next month called Raising Amazing. Monica has a bachelor's degree in sports med, and she spent most of her life as a personal coach and trainer. She and her doctor husband, Dave, have 4 boys together, 1 out of college, 2 in college, and 1 still at home. And the Swanson family lives in the country on the north shore of Oahu, Hawaii. As you can imagine, they spend a lot of time at the beach, riding waves, or capturing sunsets. Our conversation with Monica ranges from talking about having a vision for your son, doing the simple things, yet which are often the hardest things, challenging your kids to do hard things themselves, and even creating situations and scenarios to make that happen, as well as this idea of character training, helping your kids in the process of being, not just helping them in the process of doing, but helping them in the process of becoming and being. Guys, for a long time, I've wanted to have a mom's voice on this podcast, I guess for 2 reasons. One, to help dads better understand what it's like raising boys from the mom perspective, but also to help moms get a better understanding of what it's like to raise boys, again, from a mom's perspective. And I can't think of a better person than Monica to do that through this episode. She's a great guest and a compliment to our voices in helping you raise healthy and godly men. Okay, that's enough for me. Let's get to the conversation John and I had with Monica Swanson. Here we go. Well, Monica, what a privilege to have you on the show and have some of your time today. I'm super excited, as I said, to have you, your story, the work that you're doing, your perspective as a mom of boys speaking to this audience. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Welcome. Glad to have you.
It's such a privilege to be here. Thank you so much.
So I want to start with this question, and we'll see where it goes. Obviously, you are a mom. You're a mom of 4 boys. You're also in the space of other moms and the work that they're doing as moms. When a mom approaches raising a boy in particular, what are some of the things that she's thinking about? And I know it's a big, broad question because, you know, the raising of a boy is from like 0 to 18 and then on beyond, right? But like, what comes to mind when you think about the thoughts that a mom has when she's approaching raising a boy?
Yeah, great question. And there's a few themes that seem to come up the most when I hear from moms. I think that especially now, there's often just some anxiety, trepidation for the overwhelming nature of our culture and like, how can I even raise a boy in the world today? Like, what hope do I have? I think even before kids are born, moms are starting to just feel this fear kind of element come up. It just seems like an overwhelming task, I think, to raise a boy into manhood right now. So that's a big topic. Also, when the kids are young, I just hear from a lot of moms who love their little boys so much, and they feel that connection that a mother has so naturally with her sons. But then also, again, a fear element of losing that connection. You know, word on the street, I say, is that by the time they're teenagers, they're going to turn away from mom and dad, that they're going to turn to their peers and the culture, and they're going to start doing all these rebellious things, and kind of like enjoy your boys while they're young, because you're going to lose that connection pretty soon. And so it just saddens my heart, because that neither of those things have been my experience. But I think that if we aren't intentional, those are very valid fears. I think that we are raising our kids in a crazy world, and I think we will lose connection if we're not intentional. So as much as those thoughts and fears concern me, I also want to speak into them to the moms I hear from and say, then let's have an action plan. Let's be prepared to deal with these things so that they no longer have to be a fear.
Do you find that you're engaging moms of boys different than moms of girls? And I'm sure there's some overlap. So where's the overlap, and then where is there distinction?
Right. Well, I think that the overlap would just be the cultural climate we're in today. And, you know, being in a world so saturated with technology and so hypersexualized, and all the issues that we're facing as a culture, that's across the board. Parents of boys and girls are facing those things. I think parents of boys just probably the things that stand out to me, a lot of moms are concerned about the safety of their boys. They're worried about the crazy things they do. I mean, I hear from so many moms who say things like, I'm a quieter person by nature. I'm an introvert. And I've got these 2 or 3 or 4 boys, and they're loud and they're messy and they're just driving me crazy. And so they are looking for hope that that's normal, because in their brain, they're like, you know, a lot of them might've been raised with just sisters or maybe one brother, but they're just like, is this normal? Does this mean they're going to be like crazy people for the rest of their life? And then along with that, just, I think, how can they cope? How can they deal with this, stay sane, and still raise these boys into manhood? So yeah, I think moms are looking for a lot of hope right now.
Interesting. You're touching on something that I've observed, thought around the keeping the boys safe and secure. And I'm a rule follower by nature. This audience has heard me say that on a number of occasions. I don't do extreme adventure things, but there's an element of being a man that's different than being a woman, being a father versus being a mother. That's like, my perspective is a little bit of, just let him figure it out. Like he'll figure it out. And mom's like, oh no, I gotta keep him safe. I don't want him to get hurt. And it sounds like you see that it's not just me, that you're seeing that too, at least as one of the themes.
Yes, for sure. And because I'm here in Hawaii, my third son is a professional surfer. So he's out in the ocean, huge waves, sharks, he's in the elements. All my boys are adventure seekers. Like, really, I don't have a single boy who's fearful or timid. They cave dive in the summertime. They're out spearfishing. So they're very much adventure seeking boys. And that's my husband's genes much more than mine. But I am asked a lot, like, how do you let them do that? Like, do you stress? And I think God has given me maybe just a personality that is a little bit more relaxed about these things. I trust my husband's judgment. So if he approves and feels like they're prepared for things, then I just try to really trust him to lead. But yeah, as moms, I think God has given us kind of that sense of like we want to protect, and that's not all bad. I mean, certainly pray for your boys, certainly have the conversations, make sure they're prepared for the adventures they have. But yeah, I think that raising boys is unique in that way. And there are girls out there who are total adventure seekers too, but I think boys are going to tend to be more that way just by nature.
You answered my question before I could even ask it, which is that your genes or is that your husband? Obviously,
yeah, definitely my husband.
Yeah, and I like the way you said it too, Monica. You're trusting him, so that speaks to the relationship you have together as husband and wife, mother and father. That you're able to trust each other, to play in your lane of strengths. And even if you're uncomfortable, you're like, okay, I'm gonna trust you here because
yes,
yeah. And anyway, I hear that.
Yeah,
I hear that
I
bond.
speak up sometimes. I will pull my husband aside and be like, "Are you kidding me? Are you sure they're ready?" And he listens. I mean, he's respectful, and he knows that sometimes, I have a valid reason to be concerned. So it's a team effort. But yeah, I pretty much defer to him, and then I try to make it so out of sight, out of mind. Just go. I don't want to watch.
My wife's version is, just tell me you were safe and had fun. That's all I want to know. Just tell me you were safe and had fun.
Exactly. I love it.
Monica, the other thing you mentioned was the fear that moms naturally have about that disconnect that's coming in the future.
Yeah.
And I love how you said two things. One, you haven't experienced that, so thank God for that. But you developed a plan. So I'm curious, what actually got that started for you? The development of the plan?
Right. Well, I think that when my boys were young, and definitely those were the hardest years for me, was those toddler years where everything felt so chaotic and we were new to Hawaii. My husband was in medical residency, and so it was a really lonely season, and I struggled a lot as a mom. I struggled with my temper. I struggled just with that sense of wanting to control things that I couldn't control. So that's when I really dug in. I look back and just see those years as probably the most formative of my life. For me personally, as I just had to depend on God. I didn't really have many friends. I'm on this new island without family around. But also, I really dug into the topic of parenting, and I read a lot of books and I researched. And I think that I just decided to be really intentional about taking this energy, taking this boyness, and directing it in healthy ways. How we could kind of push that onto a trajectory that would lead them to good and godly manhood. And so I kind of learned to set my vision on the future instead of looking at today's battles and all the crazy, to really think, okay, how can this develop character in my sons that will lead them to the kind of men I want to raise? And so through that, what kind of connection do I want with my sons? What do I want that to look like as they grow up? Even imagining, what do I want it to be like when they launch one day? Like, what kind of a relationship that's a mutual, respectful relationship? And so I really tried to keep that vision in my mind as I spent time with them and nurtured them as a mom, yes, but also really tried to allow my love for them to kind of grow up with them. So I wasn't babying them. I was, honoring their emerging manhood, as I say, as they kind of stumbled through the awkward tween and teenage years, and just like, how can I speak to them in a way that's still parenting, still an authority figure, but also kind of showing them the respect that I think really they crave and will inspire them to continue to make good choices and to be young men of integrity.
Yeah. So when you started that, what were their ages?
Well, I would say probably around 2, 4, and 6 was when I was
Wow.
really, really like digging in because
That's
the
awesome.
first 3 were all born 2 years apart. So
Okay.
those are the years I remember going, and that's also right about when I decided to homeschool. So I started them off in a little private Christian school, and my oldest was in first grade when he started asking to homeschool. And my first thought was, heck no, like that's the last thing I should be doing. But once he brought it up, you get that kind of thing going in your head. And I started looking into it and asking questions. And then we made the leap, and we haven't stopped. So we homeschooled them all the way through. And I feel like that really allowed me the space to spend the time with them, to kind of shape their hearts and to raise them in the way that I thought that they should go, that God's word told me they should go. So I think that afforded us a lot of opportunities.
So this journey's been what, 15, 20 years since then?
The oldest is now 23 years old. And so, yeah, he was probably 6 or 7 then. So we've been going a long time. And he's one of my best friends now. So it's pretty special.
Awesome. That is. You've been growing along with him, it sounds like.
Mm-hmm. So much. Yes. I think God's stretched me, taught me so much. My youngest now is 12. So there's a 6.5-year gap between number 3 and number 4. And certainly there's some areas that I'm like, wow, I'm not on my game like I was with the first 3, but I also think I'm having a lot more fun with that one. I'm enjoying him. I'm more relaxed. Hopefully I'm still focused on the most important things. But yes, God has given me some perspective and just helped me narrow in on what matters most.
From one homeschool family to another, that makes a lot of sense. What you've been able to accomplish, the intentionality. What strikes me is that 6-year-old being aware enough to say, "Mom, I wanna be homeschooled." Like, where did that come? This is a total curiosity question. Where did that come from?
I know, right? Well, I think he has always been he's always been a learner. He loves to learn. And when he was a little boy, my husband was in medical residency, and he would carry around, big, thick medical books and pretend to read them and draw pictures. We have a diagram he did probably in 2nd grade of the heart, with all the details. And so he was always just been a learner. And I think he was really frustrated in school, even though he went to a really good school. He is like, I could be learning so much more if I had the freedom to learn what I want to learn. And then we happened to go to a church with a couple kids who were homeschooled. And I think they talked about it. And he's like, homeschool, that sounds cool. So yeah, he started bringing it up and didn't stop until we finally decided to try it. Very hesitantly at first.
Well, good for you. When we started ours, it was kindergarten basically, and I'm thinking about Bunsen burners and like high school level math, and that's 12 years away. And so we're just like 1 year at a time. 1 year at a time. We'll see how this goes, and we didn't look back. So good for you. There was another thing that you said I wanted to just draw out for a minute, which is, when I think of most parents today, I think, see their kids as what they will do once they get out from the home, right? The degree that they will get, the job they'll get, the family that they'll start, the place that they'll live. But what I heard in your intentionality and purpose was not the doing, but the person, the men that they will become, the being. And I think that just, I'd love for you to expand on that a little bit, but it fits so well with what we've talked about here, which is zoom out, get a bigger vision for who they're becoming, not just the things that they will do, the college that they'll get to, the degree that they'll get, the job that they'll get, like that's okay, but there's better. It's who they're becoming. And I very clearly heard that in the way you described your intentionality.
Right. Yes. Well, I think one thing I say in both my book, Boy Mom, and my upcoming book, Raising Amazing, is that I think if a child grows up to know and love God and love God's word, then there's not a whole lot else that you need to focus on. I mean, yes, we still need to do all the things in parenting, but I think that I've just had this understanding that if if my child's heart is shaped by their maker, if they have a deep faith and a trust in God, then the fruit of that will be good character, and good character is going to lead to good choices, good relationships, a work ethic. All the other things are going to fall into place. So the way I saw it was, if we can just focus first and foremost on faith and character in that order, then nothing else is going to really be that hard. I mean, you got to focus on things, but now you have a foundation. Now you have that baseline to return to, that anchor to just keep coming back to. And so far, that's proved really effective in my boys. My oldest two have, walked with God, love him individually, independently. Now that they've moved away across the ocean from us, they also got college scholarships, went to college. One graduated from college. And then, so far, I've seen that really fruitful. But, there's a lot of details we have to focus on as parents, but certainly the heart, it all comes from the heart. And if you can focus on that, everything else is probably going to fall into place.
So good.
I'm curious, Monica, as you have gone through this journey, you and your husband together, but there's things that you do as the mom that in this development of your sons, there's things your husband does. And then I'm assuming there's things you do together.
Yeah.
What's the distinction of those three things?
Right. It's interesting. I guess, every personality is unique. Every marriage will have unique roles.
Sure.
My husband and I are probably pretty traditional in our roles, in that, he works outside the home. He manages the yard. He does a lot. I love to cook. But we also do share a lot of responsibilities. I'm just saying, like, in general, in our roles as a family, not because we have felt we had to. It's just maybe how we were raised and what comes natural to us. But in parenting, I'm also just more of a communicator. I'm an extrovert. So I have the conversations with the kids. We talk a lot. My husband is a great leader. He has, from the time they were little, his thing was he would crawl into bed with them and teach them scripture at night before bed. He leads the family in devotionals, not religiously or regularly, but when we, during the Advent season, during Lent, occasionally we'll just gather around and he'll pull out his guitar and say, hey, let's just read some scripture and play some music. So he's a leader, but I think the nurturing stuff, my son just came home after a rough surf contest, and I'm the one that goes in his room and I'm like, tell me, how are you feeling? Like, talk to me. My husband wouldn't think to do that as much as me. Now, some dads do, and that's great. But I think that nurturing, communicating role has fallen to me. I've done most of the homeschooling. My husband does most of the sports. Thankfully, I'm focused on their homeschool record keeping and all that. And he's booking my youngest for golf tournaments and helping my third son with surf coaches and agents and all the things he deals with. So, yeah, I think there's been a pretty natural flow there. And we do make a good team. It's taken some years to kind of pan out who does what, but I think that in a good marriage, there's communication and teamwork.
So I'm curious, Monica, we're kind of bouncing around here, but when did you know that your story and your experience was going to become what it's become, this platform now that you have, this voice that you have to really make impact?
Thanks. Yes, well, it was after my fourth son was born that I've always loved to write. It wasn't my professional background. I studied sports medicine. My husband's a doctor. So I've been kind of in the fitness and health world for a lot of years, but mostly homeschooling my kids. But I was like, I see these blogs out there, so I want to try just writing. And from the first blog post I wrote, which was on nothing of importance, I was hooked. I was like, this is so fun that I can actually write and put it out there and just like share it. And it was a couple years of dabbling and like sharing photos of our Hawaiian life, sharing, some of my thoughts, recipes. And then I started to notice that what I was hearing back from people most was like parenting topics. Like, tell me more. How are your sons growing in their faith at this age? They were like early tweens and teens then, the oldest. And one day I just kind of sat down and wrote this blog post. It was when my second son became a teenager. So now I had two teens, and just kind of off the top of my head, I wrote what a teenage boy needs most from his mom. And it was like 11 things. And it really wasn't rocket science. It wasn't anything brand new, but it was what I considered common sense. Now, I have since then realized that common sense is not very common anymore. But as soon as that went out, like my computer basically blew up over the next few weeks. Like almost 2 million people read it, I think, in the first 2 weeks. I was just being flooded by emails. And it was like, I think the message in there that people were so hungry for was that message of hope, that like I was actually saying I enjoyed the teenage years, that this was the reward for all those hard years when they were young. And moms are saying, please tell me more. I want to believe that I can enjoy these years, that there's hope that my boys can grow up to be healthy and wise and men of faith. And so once I tapped into that, I was like, okay, now I know what moms need right now. So I started to share more and more of boy topics and topics about that relationship between moms and sons. And it just continued to be confirmed that there was a need out there, that moms needed hope, moms needed a positive message. And so that's kind of what sent me down that road and ended up giving me an opportunity to write Boy Mom and start the Boy Mom podcast. So it's been a really fun journey.
What surprised you most after the book, after the podcast, like after you become this overnight success, so to speak, which isn't really true. Although
an 11-year overnight,
right? Exactly. That's how it goes. Although you had the post that was really the one that might have put you on the map. But yes, the 11-year overnight success. What has surprised you the most, maybe from that moment until now?
That's a great question. What has surprised me the most? I think perhaps, and this is no judgment on anyone because it's the same for me, but how some of the simplest things are the hardest things. Mm. How we as moms, as parents probably tend to complicate things. And people are looking for like some list of rules and how they need to do this and that. And really when it comes down to it, it's really not that complicated. But the simple things are sometimes the hardest. So it's offering consequences. Like, let's try not to yell and scream and lecture and nag. Let's offer a good, swift consequence because that's going to teach your kids more than any amount of lecturing, nagging, or yelling, right? But sometimes it's that simple consequence that's so hard for us to do. Returning to biblical principles. People are like, well, where should I land on gender issues or on this or on that? And I'm like, the Bible's got it all laid out for you. Just go back to God's word because it's really pretty simple. We don't need to complicate it. I think technology, we want every rule and everyone wants a formula. And yet there are principles in God's word that can really simplify things. Now, I'm not going to say technology is simple. It's not for any of us. But I think that really parenting doesn't have to be that complicated. And I think us moms complicate a lot of things.
I dare say dads do it too, but just maybe in a different way. It just
right.
It just looks a little bit different.
Right.
Monica, I would suggest that the reason you're able to keep that simplicity in check is, I'm guessing here, so you can validate me if I'm right, that you keep your relationship with God in check. Mm-hmm. You protect it. So how do you go about doing that when you got 4 boys and all the stuff? How do you protect your relationship with God?
Yeah, thank you for asking. It's so true. And one of the biggest themes in my writing and on my podcast is always modeling. Like, kids are so much more likely to do what we do than what we say. And so if we're trying to teach them to be young men of faith, if we're trying to teach them how to protect their hearts, their eyes, we really have to. And my husband and I both are just so convinced that it's our walk with God that's going to make the biggest impact on them. And so on any given morning, they're going to find my husband and I up early reading God's word and just carving out time for that. And that takes discipline. It's not easy, especially when, I'm living in Hawaii where the whole world is up before me. So I wake up and I'm like catching up with the world, but I'm like, no, I need to be in God's word first. Sometimes that means kids, I need a few minutes. Like, this is a priority for me. Just being committed to our local church, being a part of it there, both serving and just attending and making that a commitment as a family, just living by biblical principles for ourselves, and then talking about, like, being honest that we fail, being honest that we need God's grace and forgiveness every day, and having conversations with our kids from the time they're young. You know, I always talk about Deuteronomy chapter 6 and 11, where it's really about teaching God's commands as we get up, as we walk along the street, as we lie down. And so if we have that natural love for God, if we are walking with him personally, it's going to be an overflow. And so I just feel so much accountability by having kids around. It just pushes me that much more to want to keep my walk with God right, because I know that little eyes are watching me and big eyes are watching me.
Sure. So my guess is somebody modeled this for you when you were younger.
You know, yeah, I yes and no. My parents have really grown in their own faith more in their later years.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really look back and see, my faith journey took a while to develop, and God used my husband primarily when I met him to really bring me back into a solid relationship with God. So I'm going to just give credit to my husband, who's really been, not only a great husband and my best friend, but he has really discipled me, mentored me. He's where I go when I have questions, because he is a man of the word. He's in the word all the time. And it's super fun because he engages my boys in great conversations. And now when they're home, the oldest two will be home, for holidays or something. And it never fails around the dinner table. Somebody's going to bring up what they've been learning in scripture, what they heard at church, a podcast. And then for the next 2 hours, they're like so deep into some theological thing that I half the time can't keep up. So it's really special, but he has spurred me on and encouraged me so much in my faith. And when I start to have a question, or, us women can tend to get critical or gossipy, and he'll be the first to be like, no, you're not going to go there. And so I'm really grateful for my husband's accountability and guidance and just grace for me over these years as I've grown.
And that sounds like a great peace giving to you, because when you think about the future of your sons, when they're getting married and have kids, they have that model to follow.
Oh, yeah. I'm so grateful for that. Absolutely.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much. I'm so super blessed and grateful. And as I wrote Boy Mom, my husband was such a part of that. And then my next book coming out, Raising Amazing, he not only helped me form the chapters and read everything I wrote, but my favorite part of Raising Amazing is my husband has a section at the end of each chapter, which is called A Note to the Dads. And that's really because so many people read Boy Mom and were like, do you have one of these for men? Or, they would tell me that they went on a road trip and they listened to it on Audible so that their husbands could hear it too, because they're like, all this applies to the men too, but it's called Boy Mom. And so there's a note to the dads, which I say is kind of the Cliff Notes version. It's my husband saying, okay, men, I hope you read this chapter, but if you don't, here's what you really need to know. And it's short and it's sweet. And the wives can read a chapter and then hand it off. And hopefully the men will be encouraged and challenged and inspired by my husband's words.
Monica, I think I also read or heard somewhere that your boys have contributed to the book as well, right? Like, say more about that.
Yeah. So in each chapter of Raising Amazing, there's also a note to the readers from one of my sons. And some are just, they were pretty casually written. They're busy, at college and doing all the things. One of my surfer son was in Indonesia traveling, and I'm like, I need you to write a note on this topic. But each of them wrote a little note, even the 12-year-old. So that's fun. But some of them, I'm hoping parents will read to their kids, because it might be a little bit of encouragement on a topic that kids need encouragement on. Others are just to give parents a perspective from a son who's grown up in our family. So yeah, it was definitely a family affair, this book.
So the phrase that I often use, and I'm experiencing it in my own season of parenting, is the return on the investment. As your boys age into men, you're getting the return on the investment, and it's such a cool feeling, right? Like you're I can see it in your face. You're living it.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. 3 John 4 is my very favorite parenting verse. I have no greater joy than to hear that my children walk in truth. And that's something I can't even put into words. I just tell young moms, it's so worth all the work now. Like, put that work in now, because nothing will feel better than to have an adult who is walking with Jesus. And that's like the greatest reward for all your work.
Staying on the Raising Amazing theme for a minute, by the way, coming out soon in February. You talk about character training, adversity, creating challenges, like actually creating challenges for your kids. Talk about that. Like, what do you mean when you say actually creating challenges?
Right. Well, I think if we're honest, most of us would say our kids have a pretty easy life. Now, I know there's people listening whose kids might face, a medical challenge or a learning challenge or have something really difficult. And that's, if so, what I say is take full advantage of that in a way that it can help your kids not be in self-pity or, learn to use that in some unhealthy way, but instead say, how can we grow through this? How can we develop character through it? And then for the rest, which is probably the majority, our kids don't face too many hard things. I mean, I say in my book, they're typically fed 3 meals a day plus snacks. They have a bed to sleep in. They have at least one parent who loves them. Like, they are so far ahead of most of the world just in those things alone. And so it's going to be easy for them to grow up kind of soft and entitled and weak and not able to face hard things. I mean, we tease my 12-year-old and just be like, buddy, you need to learn to do hard things because the world is not going to go easy on you. So my husband and I are just big believers in giving kids challenges, make them do work, hard work. Even when they're able to get outside the house, help them get jobs. Our first 2 boys were dishwashers in a local restaurant that did not go easy on them at all. They grew up quick doing that. But around the house, homeschooling, I'm constantly challenging my youngest son to just do hard things and have a vision for what that looks like, what that will lead to. But I think that more and more the society we live in with so many so much instant gratification and so many things are so much easier, with your voice, you can ask Alexa or Siri to answer questions, give you information. And so I think kids are kind of growing up without the challenges they need to develop grit and perseverance and those good character qualities that will really pay off later in life.
Yeah. That whole idea of do hard things for various reasons did not enter into my vocabulary until late in my adult life. It was not something I grew up with. And so as I reflect back on what my kids might have missed at a young age, it's things like that, because I'm learning it later in life, therefore didn't have it as a tool to pass on to my kids. But I think that's maybe why it stood out to me as I was reviewing some of this stuff ahead of time. Like, we do have it easy. Generally speaking, we have it easy. And that easiness does not foster growth and development and anything that's worth doing. There's resistance, and it's in the resistance where the muscle, the development, the stretching, the growth, the learning, the insight is built. And boy, the earlier we can get our kids to grasp that as part of the process, I think the better off they're going to be.
Definitely. Yes. And I think they need role models for that. They hit an age, especially in those tween and teenage years, where just hearing it from mom and dad isn't going to be enough. So we need to point them to people who have done that and are doing it and talking about it that they can learn from and be inspired by. And that's been a big part of our parenting process as well.
How did you identify, find, or select, recruit, assign those types of role models?
Yes. Well, part of our story here on this topic of character is in Boy Mom, I talk about how we went through kind of a rough patch with my second son. I mean, fortunately, thus far, none of my boys have been openly rebellious or anything like that. But when he was a young teenager, he definitely went through a stage where there was just some attitude, kind of a critical nature. He would walk in the room and it was like a dark cloud came in with him. And we're like, okay, what's he going to criticize next? And so my husband and I were really frustrated and praying and talking about it. And then one day, early in a new year, I had this idea. I mean, at that point, I was listening to podcasts. I was reading good books. I had found some TED Talks. And I was like, you know what? This son needs some inspiration outside of mom and dad. And so I gathered this list of anything I could think of off the top of my head, which wasn't excellent. But I said, you know what? For the next, I don't know if I said year or 6 months, I was like, you have a new daily task. Every day you're going to do, and for lack of better idea, I called it character training. I was like, every day I want you to listen to, watch or read something on this list. And I gave him a fresh new journal and I said, I want you to write down the date, what you did that day, and one nugget, at least one nugget that you learned from that. And of course, the first question anyone with more than one child would know was, well, are the brothers doing it? I was like, no, but this is your issue. That's not how we parent. We parent individually. And so just get started. And over time, I mean, the first day or two, there was one nugget written, and then he might try to skip a day. And I was like, really on him, like, this is going to be a daily thing. And over time, I started to notice he had like pages written. And pretty soon he had quotes and scriptures on cards hanging up above his desk. And a month or two in, he would walk into the living room and we would all look over, and it was like he was thinking before he was speaking. And I believe that this one thing we did really changed the trajectory of that son's life. And ultimately, I mean, our family environment and culture. And a couple of years later, that son started the Truth for Youth podcast, which was all about character and truth. And that was during his gap year. Then he went to college and didn't continue, but it was really good. But anyway, I share about this in my book, Boy Mom, and I had probably more people respond to me in email to that than anything else. And parents were like, I want to do this character training with my son or daughter. Can I get that list? And so what I ended up doing, because for one, that list was not great. And I knew that list alone wasn't magic. I knew that wasn't going to change children's lives or families' culture on its own. And so I created an online course called the Character Training Course. And in it, I have modules that really cover the foundations of faith and different character qualities. I have interviews with dads of daughters, with businessmen. So I really wanted to cover the full spectrum of why character matters so much, how we can inspire our kids. And there's just so many things packed in there. But finally, at the end, I give the biggest resource list. Like, I really updated it, and I found TED Talks, YouTube channels, books, blog posts. And I just give a really nice long list. I have an interview with my son where he shares his story of being the original character training student. And then I encourage people to try it out with their kids, depending on what age they are. You can adjust it accordingly. But that's been so much fun to see hundreds of families all over the world get to jump in and do character training with their own kids. And there's a module for young years, because some people are like, my son's only 4, but I really want to start. And I'm like, right on, that's the best time to start. So there's a module for the early years, and the rest of it is really aimed towards tweens and teens.
Oh, good for you. Good for you. That's so cool. And it aligns again with the message here about starting early, focusing on character, having intention, purpose, define what success looks like in a bigger, deeper way than just, winning the trophy, getting on the team, getting the grades, getting the job, whatever. So good for you. We'll make sure that we get that referenced in the show notes so that listeners can have easy access to it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Monica, all of that you just said somewhat answers the question I had, but I want to sort of rephrase it, because I was going to ask you, what about the mom or dad who's listening is like, I'm so far behind and I don't think I can catch up. You just gave great ways to start.
Yeah.
So I want to direct it differently. And so the mom or dad who's sitting here just sort of feeling hopeless, I don't know where to start, and I don't even know that I can. I don't have the energy.
Sure.
I don't think I can do this. What would you say to them?
Well, first of all grace abounds. Like, there is no condemnation. Certainly, I think it's healthy to own our mistakes. There's been plenty of things I've done where I've had to just backpedal and say, God, forgive me. Kids, forgive me, really humbly acknowledging where maybe we didn't know better. We didn't realize we were busy. We were focused on work, or maybe there's some health issue in the family or something that complicates life. All grace abounds. But then I say, it's never too late. It is never too late. And especially if you do humbly acknowledge the places that you feel like you've blown it, kids are going to see that. And that alone is setting such an example to them. They want a relationship with mom and dad. Even if they don't act like it, I promise your kids want a relationship with you. So even if they're adults by now, talking to them, letting them know that you're repentant and you're sorry, or that you just didn't realize this area. I mean, a lot of parents I hear from just don't realize technology, the dangers out there, and their kids have already stumbled upon things, and they're like just beating themselves up. And I'm like, we need to acknowledge that this is all new stuff, that we're all still learning. So just go to your kids and have a conversation. They are going to see so much in that, and they're very likely going to want to join you in that journey of doing things differently.
That's great. We probably don't talk about, we don't talk about grace enough. I don't think we do. And so just starting there is a good place to start. And, that's really good. So mom and dad, listen to Monica. She's giving you some good advice here, in my opinion.
Well, thanks. I will say to that though, and I'm glad if this brings up the topic of grace, because it is so important. I've also come across some circles in the Christian parenting world that there's a little too much grace. It's kind of sloppy grace. And there's a lot of moms, authors, women who are leaders in the Christian community who sometimes seem to be giving what I call, just sloppy grace, where it's just like, everything's going to be okay. You are not in control of your kids. Only God can control your kids. And I'm like, ugh, like it's true. God is sovereign, but he has given us a great privilege and responsibility.
Yeah.
So let's not, just relax to the point that we're not doing our job well. Let's stay intentional, doing what we can do, and then trust God to do what only God can do. We can't change hearts, but boy, there's a lot we can do for those 18 years. And then it's out of our hands. I mean, we parent for many years after that. You guys, I'm sure, will agree. But as far as the true opportunity is really there when they're in our homes.
Yeah. I'll just say this final thought here. You're reminding me of many moments this week that I've talked about the parable of talents with people. And so if parents can look at their tasks they've been given by their creator and their master as a stewarding opportunity, and your kids are the talents, if you want to use that language here, that God gave you. Sloppy grace doesn't work.
No. And there's nothing that is going to be more important, when you're on your deathbed looking back. It's not going to matter. I get extreme and I'm like, if you need to sell your home and move to something smaller, simplify your life, quit your job, move to a different town, do whatever you have to do to protect those kids, to make sure they've got good influences around them, to connect as a family. You can't, this is the greatest privilege you'll ever have on this earth, more important than any work you do. You just really need to take parenting seriously.
Well said. And I know it's resonating with some of our listeners. We've mentioned both of your books, the course. How can people connect with you, find you, follow you? Where do you send them?
Yes. My home base is my website, monicaswanson.com. And there's links to everything I do there. I do like to hang out on Instagram. So if people are there, I'm at monicaswanson_. And definitely say hi. And if you found me through this podcast, let me know. I'd love to meet you and say hi back.
Thank you for giving us your time, for some of your story, your expertise, for the work that you're doing to make an impact, being willing to not just not just embrace humility, and admit some of the shortcomings, but also speak them and turn them into opportunities to educate and share and impact others who, by the way, are going through the same thing, right? Like our kids are unique, we're unique, but the circumstances are so similar. There's so many similarities in the themes. And so good for you. Props to you for doing what you're doing. The 11-year overnight success, the second book that's coming here shortly. Like it's a testament to your resilience, your doing hard things, and the calling that you're living out. So good for you. And thank you for honoring us with some of your time today.
Oh, thank you. It's been such a great conversation.
Well, guys, if you've made it this far and you're hearing this message right now, I trust that you found this conversation enjoyable and enriching, encouraging, maybe inspiring. Here's my ask of you. Normally, it's kind of a wide open ask, and what are you taking away? But here's my ask of you today. Share this episode with your wife, or with your child's mom, or perhaps with another mom, maybe even a single mom that you know that is raising boys and could benefit from Monica's perspective and the conversation, the wisdom, the experience that comes out through this discussion. Who do you know, in addition to your wife, who would benefit from listening to this? That's my ask of you. Share this episode and help us get the word out for Monica and the impact that she is having on moms and dads as well. You can find her again at monicaswanson.com. That's her website. If you're on Instagram, she's Monica Swanson _ there. Remember the character training course. She didn't mention this, but she's got the Boy Mom podcast, which is now relaunching and transitioning into the Monica Swanson podcast, and her new book, Raising Amazing, coming out next month. All resources that you and or your wife can check out to help you grow in your parenting of your boys and your girls, helping them to become healthy and godly men and women. Okay, guys, that's enough for today's episode. We'll be back once again next week. Until then, adios. To send us your comments or questions, you can email us at feedback@thenextmanup.com. The theme music is by Jacob Stanifer at Jacob Stanifer Music, and this show is part of the NRT Podcast Network.